A black and white photograph flickers for half a second. An old priest beside hammered metal plates, their surfaces crowded with symbols no one can comfortably place. Then another image appears, a rough stone face from a cave in Illinois. Then a dark iron object, small enough to hold, said to have been found inside coal far older than any human hand. History usually reaches us as a smooth line. Dates, civilizations, migrations, inventions. One century follows another, and the past behaves. But beneath that orderly surface are objects that arrive like interruptions. Some were photographed, then moved. Some were displayed, then withdrawn. Some were dismissed as frauds before anyone agreed what they were. Others became museum pieces, locked away from the public not always by malice, but by uncertainty, embarrassment, or the simple gravity of institutions. Tonight, Hidden Archive opens 10 of these uneasy files, not to declare verdicts, not to replace archaeology with rumor, but to ask a quieter question: what happens when an artifact becomes more powerful after it disappears? Every archive has two histories. One is written on paper, in accession numbers, field notes, and cautious museum labels. The other lives in whispers around the object. Who found it? Who took it away? Who was allowed to see it? And why the story changed after the door closed. The phrase, confiscated artifact, can be misleading. Sometimes it means a government agency physically removed an object from private hands. Sometimes it means a church, a museum, a military authority, or an unknown collector absorbed it into a place where ordinary people could no longer examine it. Sometimes the claim of seizure appears later, after the evidence has already become difficult to trace. That uncertainty matters. In the world of ancient mysteries, absence is never neutral. A missing object invites imagination. A locked collection invites suspicion. A blurred photograph invites more belief than a clear report ever could. So we begin with a rule. Each file must be handled gently. Some may be genuine objects surrounded by exaggerated stories. Some may be modern creations mistaken for ancient relics. Some may be legends that grew around a single photograph. Yet the human question remains constant. Why do certain discoveries seem to vanish at the very moment they begin to ask uncomfortable questions? Our first file begins not with a scientist, but with a priest in the Ecuadorian highlands. Cuenca, Ecuador, sits high in the Andes, where stone streets hold the chill of mountain air and old churches seem to lean into the clouds. In the 20th century, Father Carlo Crespi became known not only as a missionary and educator, but as the guardian of a strange collection brought to him by local people. They came with metal sheets, carved panels, figures, masks, and objects said to have emerged from caves or hidden places in the region. Some were crude, some were intricate, some appeared to carry marks that viewers compared to writing from distant civilizations. The most famous images show Father Crespi standing beside rows of metallic plates, many described as gold or gold-colored, their surfaces filled with figures, animals, and symbolic designs. To believers, they suggested contact between ancient South America and worlds far across the ocean. To skeptics, they suggested modern manufacture, folk art, or a confused mixture of objects from many periods. The truth is not simple. What gives the Crespi collection its power is not only what the objects might have been, it is what reportedly happened after the priest's death. Portions of the collection were said to have been moved, dispersed, hidden, or quietly taken into institutional control. For some, that disappearance became more important than the metal itself. If the plates were meaningless, why did their absence feel so carefully managed? The Crespi story lingers because it touches an older wound in archaeology, the question of ancient contact across oceans. For generations, mainstream history has been cautious about claims that civilizations in the Americas exchanged ideas with Mesopotamia, Egypt, or the Mediterranean world in deep antiquity. Caution is not the enemy of wonder. It is how fragile evidence survives. Still, certain objects make the imagination restless. A plate with strange markings, a figure that appears out of place, a design that resembles something from another continent. None of these details proves contact by itself. Similar shapes can emerge independently. Human hands, separated by oceans, often solve visual problems in similar ways. But the Crespi collection became a stage on which a larger drama was performed. On one side stood the desire to protect history from false claims. On the other stood the fear that history had been made too narrow, too neat, too unwilling to admit movement, exchange, and forgotten voyages. The missing pieces left a vacuum. Into that vacuum came theories, warnings, photographs, and decades of debate. This is where the viewer's question from our earlier archive returns with force. When an object disappears, does the mystery end, or does the absence become part of the artifact itself? To answer that, we leave the Andes and cross into the American Midwest, where another cave story would challenge the map from below. At first, the landscape gives nothing away. Illinois fields roll quietly under a wide sky, their soil holding the memory of rivers, glaciers, and ancient Native American cultures. Then comes the claim, a cave filled with objects that appear to belong not to the known archaeology of the region, but to a distant Mediterranean world. The name most often attached to the story is Russell Burrows. According to the account, Burrows entered a hidden cave system and found stone tablets, carved figures, burial chambers, and objects bearing images that some interpreted as Roman, Egyptian, or Near Eastern. The story quickly became one of the most disputed claims in alternative archaeology. Supporters saw in the artifacts a possibility that ancient travelers crossed oceans and reached inland North America long before accepted timelines allowed. Critics argued that the pieces looked inconsistent, unprovenanced, and possibly fabricated. The location itself became part of the tension. Without open access, careful excavation, and a transparent chain of custody, the cave could not speak in the language archaeology requires. Then came the familiar pattern. The alleged site became inaccessible, the objects scattered through private hands or disappeared from view, and unnamed groups were said to have taken control. Whether those details reflect fact, misunderstanding, or legend, the emotional force is clear. A cave is not merely a hole in the earth. It is a promise that something below the surface has waited for us. The Burrows Cave file forces a difficult distinction. An artifact can be interesting without being reliable. A story can be meaningful without being proven. And a disappearance can make a weak claim feel stronger than it deserves. This is the midpoint where the archive changes shape. The deeper mystery is not only whether Mediterranean travelers reached Illinois, or whether every carved stone is authentic. The deeper mystery is why we are so drawn to objects that seem to rupture the official map of time. Part of the answer lies in national memory. American history, as many people learned it, often begins too late and too simply. It narrows the continent into a sequence of arrivals, discoveries, and frontiers, while the land itself holds far older human worlds. When an object appears to suggest that the story was more crowded, more connected, or more complicated, it awakens both curiosity and defensiveness. That does not make the object true, but it does explain why the debate can feel personal. To question a timeline is sometimes to question identity. To challenge a museum label is sometimes to challenge the authority of the people who wrote it. This is where our third file becomes essential, because it is smaller, stranger, and harder to place emotionally. Not a chamber of carvings, but a single piece of iron said to have emerged from ancient coal. In 1885, near Wolfsegg in Austria, miners reportedly found an iron object embedded in a block of brown coal. It was compact, dark, and oddly shaped, with grooves around its sides and a form that appeared more deliberate than natural. The object later became known as the Wolfsegg Iron, or the Salzburg Cube. To those fascinated by out-of-place artifacts, it seemed impossible. If the coal was millions of years old, how could a human-made iron object be inside it? The claim suggested a contradiction so severe that it appeared to tear open the timeline. Scientists and museum authorities offered more conventional explanations. It may have been a piece of mining equipment, a meteorite-like object, or an industrial remnant that became associated with the coal through error or misunderstanding. Over time, the original object was reportedly removed from ordinary view, and what many people saw afterward was a replica or later display. Here, the missing original mattered again. The Wolfsegg file shows how little an artifact needs to become mythic. It does not need a temple or a tomb. It does not need inscriptions or gold. It only needs to sit in the wrong place at the wrong time. The term often used is art, an out-of-place artifact. But the phrase may reveal more about us than the object. Perhaps nothing is more unsettling than evidence that refuses to stay inside its assigned century. Once we understand the pattern, other files begin to echo in the same chamber. The Fuente Magna bowl, associated with Bolivia, has been described by some as carrying markings reminiscent of ancient Near Eastern writing. The claim is debated, and the evidence remains incomplete. But the object became another symbol of possible contact across impossible distance. Then there are the Michigan relics, thousands of inscribed objects that appeared in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the American Midwest. Some presented imagery suggesting biblical or Old World influence. Many scholars have long regarded them as forgeries, yet their collection, removal, and institutional holding gave them an afterlife that simple dismissal could not erase. These fourth and fifth files are not strong because they settle history. They are strong because they reveal how contested objects move through culture. A suspected fake can still become historically important as evidence of belief, ambition, fraud, hope, or the hunger for a deeper origin story. The moment an artifact enters a drawer, a museum basement, or a private cabinet, its meaning changes. It stops being only an object and becomes a question about access. Who gets to examine the past? Who gets to decide when a mystery is finished? And when an object is judged false, should it disappear, or should it remain visible as part of the story of how humans search, err, and imagine? The next files make that question even harder because some were never lost at all. They were simply taken into official custody. The Baghdad battery is often described as a small, ancient jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod, found in Iraq and later held in museum collections. Some have suggested it may have functioned as a primitive electrical cell. Others argue the interpretation is overstated, and that the object may have had a more ordinary ritual or storage purpose. Its mystery was amplified not only by its shape, but by its movement through institutions, conflict, and loss. When an object tied to ancient technology becomes inaccessible, damaged, or caught in the turbulence of modern history, speculation grows in the space where direct study becomes difficult. The Antikythera mechanism offers a different lesson. Recovered from a shipwreck off Greece, it is widely recognized as an extraordinary ancient device for tracking celestial cycles. Unlike many disputed artifacts, it is real, studied, and profoundly important. Yet it, too, spent long years as a corroded puzzle inside institutional care before modern imaging revealed the delicacy of its design. These sixth and seventh files remind us that official custody is not always suppression. Sometimes it is preservation. Sometimes institutions save what private hands would destroy. But custody also creates distance. The public sees a label, a photograph, a glass case, while the object's deeper complexity remains in the hands of specialists. The mystery, then, is not always that someone is hiding the past. Sometimes the past is simply too fragile to be touched. A carved wooden bird from Saqqara, Egypt, has inspired theories about ancient flight. Its shape resembles a bird, but its wings have led some viewers to imagine a model aircraft. The evidence does not require that conclusion, yet the object continues to draw attention because it sits near the border between symbol and machine. The Klerksdorp spheres, found in South Africa, have also been presented as objects too precise for deep geological time. Many geologists interpret them as natural mineral formations, but their smooth curves and grooves have helped them enter the larger family of out-of-place objects. Then there are the so-called Drapa stones, a story of carved discs, remote mountains, and vanished evidence. Unlike the Antikythera mechanism, this file rests heavily in the realm of legend. Documentation is thin, claims are difficult to verify, and the absence of stable evidence has become the main engine of the story. These 8th, 9th, and 10th files are not equal in credibility. That is important to say. Some are physical objects with museums and photographs. Some are contested interpretations. Some may be stories that grew more elaborate with each retelling. Yet together, they reveal the same emotional pattern. We do not only seek artifacts because they answer questions. We seek them because they give shape to our uncertainty. And uncertainty, when handled without care, can harden into belief before evidence has finished speaking. Why would any authority remove or restrict an ancient object? The most ordinary answers are often the most overlooked. A fragile artifact may need conservation. A disputed object may need legal review. A sacred object may be held back because communities connected to it deserve respect. A stolen object may be seized because it belongs somewhere else. There are also less graceful reasons. Institutions can be embarrassed. Collectors can be secretive. Governments can be cautious. Museums can inherit objects without clean records, then keep them quiet rather than invite difficult questions about origin, ownership, or authenticity. The phrase protecting history can mean many things. Sometimes it means protecting evidence from damage. Sometimes it means protecting reputations. Sometimes it means protecting a public story that has become easier to teach than to revise. This does not require imagining a single hidden hand controlling the past. Real life is usually more human and more complicated. People misplace records. Officials avoid controversy. Scholars resist weak claims. Enthusiasts overstate what they have. Reporters simplify. Viewers remember the most dramatic version. By the time the story reaches us, the artifact may be buried beneath layers of human behavior. That is why the question is not simply, were these objects seized? The deeper question is, what kind of world produces so many stories about seizure? What fear, hope, or longing makes us believe the past is being kept just out of reach? There is a quiet loneliness in many of these stories. Father Crespi aging beside his crowded rooms of metal and memory. A cave entrance in Illinois becoming more powerful because few can enter it. A small iron object from Austria reduced to photographs, replicas, and arguments. Museum drawers holding things that once passed through living hands. Every artifact begins as touch. Someone hammered a plate, carved a stone, shaped a jar, polished a sphere, or lifted a strange object from the earth and wondered what it meant. Long before theories, institutions, and arguments, there was a human hand meeting matter. That may be why these cases remain emotionally alive. They connect our present uncertainty to the ancient uncertainty of the makers themselves. We imagine them not as dates in a textbook, but as people standing under the same sky, trying to leave a mark. Yet our desire for connection can mislead us. We may see writing where there is decoration. We may see machines where there are birds. We may see lost civilizations where there are natural formations. Wonder is not proof, and skepticism is not cruelty. The best approach is harder than belief or dismissal. It is patience. To look closely. To admit what is unknown. To protect evidence without burying it. To let mystery remain open without turning it into certainty too soon. But patience rarely spreads as quickly as a missing artifact. And so the archive grows. The most revealing thing about these 10 files may not be the objects themselves, but the way people gather around them. Some come looking for a rewritten timeline. Some come looking for fraud. Some come looking for reassurance that the world is still capable of surprise. All three impulses are human. History is not a wall of stone. It is a living construction built from fragments. New discoveries do change it, though usually slowly, with repeated testing, careful context, and uncomfortable correction. The past has been revised many times, not by rumor, but by evidence patient enough to survive doubt. At the same time, institutions are not immune to failure. They can be cautious to the point of silence. They can confuse authority with possession. They can forget that public trust is built not only by protecting artifacts, but by explaining why protection is needed. The public, too, has a responsibility. A mystery deserves better than instant certainty. If an artifact seems impossible, the first response should not be belief or ridicule, but attention. Where was it found? Who documented it? What is the chain of custody? Can it be studied again? These questions may sound less thrilling than the legend of a confiscated relic, but they are the doorway through which wonder becomes knowledge. And still, even after every careful question, something remains. A feeling, a shadow, the sense that the earth has not finished speaking. We began with flickering images, a priest beside metal plates in Ecuador, carved stones attributed to a hidden cave in Illinois, an iron object said to have emerged from ancient coal in Austria. Around them gathered 7 more files, each with its own mixture of object, claim, custody, doubt, and longing. Some may be misunderstood. Some may be exaggerated. Some may be genuine artifacts carrying stories far stranger than their labels allow. Others may be warnings about how easily the human mind can turn absence into evidence. The question is not whether every mystery in the archive is true. The question is why these stories endure. Perhaps they endure because history, even at its most scientific, is still a conversation with the dead. We ask the earth for certainty, and it gives us fragments. We ask museums for answers, and they give us glass cases. We ask photographs for proof, and they give us shadows. So when an ancient object disappears from public view, something in us feels that a sentence has been left unfinished. Hidden Archive does not close that sentence tonight. It leaves it where all honest inquiry must sometimes leave it, open, cautious, and alive. The past is not silent. It is patient. And now and then, through dust, stone, metal, and memory, it places a question in our hands and waits to see what kind of people we will become while trying to answer it.